Bum,
Yep.
bum, 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 bum.
Are we live yet?
Yeah, I should imagine we are, yes. Good evening, everybody. How are you this evening? I'm going to check levels my end.
Yeah. And
Uh,
hello, everybody. Let's
yes,
see if it. Yeah.
yes, you are bouncing, I am bouncing, we are good.
Excellent. Hello, Gerard.
Right. Yeah, I've had a really fun day today. About 3 o'clock this afternoon, I discovered when editing some videos that you'd think after countless years of doing this that I'd check that my microphone was on.
I've done that so many times. It's so annoying. You do
And
like a full day's work and you lose it all.
And I'm not sure where it comes from. I'm pretty sure it's a combination of Windows mucking around with audio settings. I'm pretty sure of that.
Which is interesting because you and I had our bi-monthly, I wonder if I should just move to Linux now conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked into this serious. So I don't know who's watching at the moment that's using Linux. I'd love to know if people are actually using Linux. I've got it
On my
installed as a
laptop.
virtual machine. I've just been going through the process of making sure that LMMS could be set up on Mac, on Linux, and on PC today. And I really love Linux, but I think I've got the technical chops. I just really don't have the time or inclination to fix lots of stuff. And I've been looking at it seriously
Well,
over and
modern
over
distros
again.
are better than they were. Like, I remember 10 years ago, installing drivers on Linux was just, like, that's a week's work.
I mean, when I was installing, and I don't know if this is a new thing because I was on Pop OS a few years back, and I've used it again for the LMMS course, which we'll get into more of in a moment. But when I installed LMMS today on Linux, it installed all of the dependencies for me as well, which was really, really nice for it to do. I wasn't
Yes.
expecting it to do that. I was like, oh, this is a lot easier. The
Yeah,
one
it's getting
thing
a lot better.
the one thing I did have, and this is going back a couple of years, I wanted to show everybody how to compile Ardour. Because if you've got a step-by-step guide that you could run and compile Ardour, then you can have the software for free. That's kind of part of the deal. And getting all the dependencies working, it was just a matter of, okay, does it compile? What's it missing? This thing. Okay, put that thing in. Does it compile? No, it's missing these two things. And that would go on and on and on for about
Yeah.
30 minutes. And I was just thinking, I don't know if there's any way that I can do this video as a tutorial and actually it be a meaningful tutorial. Because I'm sat there thinking, okay, I'm on
Well,
a
here's the thing.
completely blank
If you're
system.
good enough to be able to do that and then change the dependencies on your side depending on what's missing, you probably don't need the tutorial.
Yeah, maybe. And with all the different distros, it might be that I've got version 1.3 of something, but you've got version 1.4 of something.
Well,
And
you've
so
already
you
got
get,
this because you've got
yeah,
this other piece of software, but not that because the viewer's got something. And yeah.
yeah, installing Python on a PC can be a bit like that because you can have different packages already installed if you're not working in your virtual environments, which is always fun
I
and
keep going back and
games.
forth on it, and honestly, the only thing that's been slowing me down for the part, well, yeah, slowing me down for the past year and a half. At some
Yeah,
point, I'm going to just give up on Windows entirely. Um, is the video editing software we use, which does run on Linux fine, but the
yeah,
codecs we use on our previous videos, like we could change codecs going forward, and that solves the problem. But all of our old stuff isn't supported by default on Linux, so we would have to, because it's not a free and open source
yeah.
codex, it's a paid for codex. So we would have to write some sort of batching script.
And it's totally doable, but it's one of those things. Is it something that is worth doing?
Hmm.
I'm fortunate enough. I've got a laptop over there that is the like editing computer. So when I'm done on this computer, I scooch over there and I do the editing over there.
You
And
scooch over there, but you hop on over here.
exactly to Blender. And yeah, and so I can just I can muck around on the main PC if I like, and it does. Resolve is the editing suite that we use. And I got it installed on Pop OS, and I ended up in this really strange position where I could have audio and no video, or I could have video and no audio. And I could record in ProRes and it would work, but then each minute would be like 10 gigs, and I didn't fancy that as an option.
Well, we have found scripts that will just use FFmpeg, whatever it's called.
Yeah,
But
and
we haven't played with it.
well, Well, going on from this morning and this afternoon's fun and games with not making sure my microphone was unmuted before I started going, it's it's amazing the whole video production process. It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're sitting down like the camera in this and just saying something, or it's a more detailed tutorial where you've got slides and more editing is required. It doesn't seem to ever be as straightforward as
Oh
it
no.
is to just watch the video. And it's amazing. I've seen behind the scenes of many creators now, and the work that goes in, and the highly edited, curated, sort of smushing together of all their thoughts and feelings into such a small, tight space takes hours. It really does.
And I'm not somebody who gets rid of all the hesitation, and I
Mm,
get rid of the worst typos and bugs because there's no meaningful educational reason to
yeah,
keep them in.
yeah.
But I'll keep them in. We should probably stop talking about Linux so much and editing and
Oh,
talk about Lemazade.
Limzade. So yes, today I have started officially recording the LMMS content, which means that some of it will be edited tomorrow. I will only be around for half a day tomorrow to do editing, so those bits will start being uploaded. So tomorrow you should see coming to a course near you.
Stop.
Mhm.
If you have the early access,
If you have the early access, thank you, Jan.
yes. We need to be very careful about that because part of the thing that okay, let's go back. If you backed our Kickstarter, because if you don't know what we're talking about, for our action RPG courses, part of that is the music course, which is being done in
Yeah.
LMMS, which stands for LMMS.
I don't know if it actually stands. Should I know this? Probably not. But
The certain tiers get early access, and the reason we do it like that isn't just to be like, "Hey, you're special," and the rest of it. It's if we've made a critical mistake, then a small number of people will catch it and we can fix it before it goes live, and a whole bunch of people are frustrated.
okay.
After we've got a certain amount of content, we'll
Yeah.
throw them out into the wild.
Exactly. So LMMS formerly was known as Linux Multimedia Studio.
Does it work in Linux though?
It does. Although I saw Wine being installed when I when I installed it, so they might be relying on on the emulation layer as well there. Which for music production, I don't think it's as difficult with latency and all that it would be if you were doing gaming and things like that. But
You don't
yes,
know Linux. Wine it's not an emulator, but that's what it stands for. Wine is not an emulator. It's got its own name in the acronym. Um, it's a way of running Windows software, particularly games, on Linux. It
yeah.
does a whole bunch of things in the back end.
So one thing I have discovered whilst playing with Linux today, moving into LMMS, and for anybody just joined us, it would be great to know if you use Linux yourselves. I have discovered there are most of LMMS runs absolutely fine, but when it comes to installing VSTs, that's not always the case. For a start, they require a .dll file on the Windows file system, which is a Windows
So
dynamic
we're
linked
really
library.
heavy on the jargon in this episode.
Yeah, well, welcome. So a virtual instrument is, as it sounds, it's an extra thing that you can add to LMMS. In this case, an instrument. It could be a drum kit, could be a whole orchestra. It can vary depending on what it is. It can also be an effect. It's a way of plugging in extra functionality. And the VST, which I think is virtual something instrument or so, VSTI, I think is the full name of it. It's just a way of expanding the functionality of any digital audio workstation that supports them. However, they have to be written with the operating system in mind as well. So you may find that certain plugins just don't work with Linux. Now, I've read through a lot of forum posts and blog posts today of how to get this specific one up and running using Wine emulation layers and other things to try and get them working. But I think it's going to vary from VST to VST of which ones are successful and which ones are not, unfortunately.
But yeah, so how's the course feeling so far? Because one thing I always find is I plan this thing out and I have the curriculum and I start recording and it has a completely different. It's a hard thing to explain if you haven't tried like making these videos, but the sort of the flavor of them, if that makes sense, like how they feel. I've got
So
a weird synesthesia here, but
Yeah, it's a weird one. So when you're recording a course, you've often got a curriculum all laid out, and you start going through that curriculum, and then you get to a particular lecture, and you start teaching it, and then you realize, or have this fear, should I have taught this other thing or this thing here? And you realize that one lecture might be three, and you're trying to
Mm.
cram too much into one. In some cases, I mean, especially with Blender stuff, I find myself coming across that all the time. I just have, oh, there's this really exciting thing, and I need to draw myself back in. Because we're right at the very beginnings of the course, it is relatively straightforward. I don't like the word simple, it's straightforward. We're going to be hitting
Right.
just key points, how to install, what these settings do, what these functions do. So there's no real ambiguity or excitement about the UI essentially. But when we start talking further down the line about different chords that you could use or different rhythms that you can use, now you start to get artistry coming in, and it can get a bit. I can get a bit excited, but from what I've heard and what the feedback I've had, without my head getting too big so I can't fit in the frame anymore, is people like my little explorations. I don't go off on massive tangents too often, but those little explanations where you drift off slightly, explain something, and come back in again helps create a much fuller picture than just being isolated with the tool you're focused on or the technique you're focused on at the time.
I mean, to me, that's the difference between what I would call a tutorial and what I would call a recipe. And
Exactly.
this is
Yeah.
not to denigrate people who make the videos that I call recipes. It's one is this is the how and why it works. Let's play with it. What can you make? And the other is here's how to solve this one problem in this one
Mm.
instance, which you can learn from, but is not. It doesn't have the same kind of mastery at the end of it as sitting down and figuring out the why.
Yeah, it can be really challenging, especially with a topic like
I
like
keep
music.
losing the stream, by the way. Like I know it's still going, but this happened last week.
Your poor internet.
I
Um,
know.
so it can be really music can feel really inaccessible to people. I feel it's almost like maths. You're told at a young age by someone who you
Yeah.
hold in high regard. Oh, you know, they might have said, "Don't sing. You're no good at it." That's you're no good at something because you haven't practiced it. So there's a lot of inbuilt.
Don't spend too much time on the guitar, you'll never be a musician.
Yeah, and
The one I find
yeah,
is it's this very harmful idea of left brain, right brain, which
mm.
is not true, right? It's not how humans work. You're not divided into left brain person, right brain person.
It
The
feels like it should
propens
be though, doesn't it? Because we like putting things in pigeonholes and saying
we
this
like the
or
category.
that. Yeah,
But the amount of time I've met people who work in the industries I grew up in, right? So theater and opera and all the rest of it, who will say things like, I wish I could code. I'm not logical. You know, I'm not scientific. I'm no good at maths. Or the amount of people in coding who tell me they wish they could be creative.
yeah.
I love bringing out the whiteboard. It's so much fun. Um,
The first step at being good at something is sucking at it. Yes, I think another thing that just while we're talking about teaching in general, another thing that happens as you get, especially as you get older, is everything you currently do, you're pretty good at. So anything that you start new,
I
when you're
thank you.
standing all of these pillars of success, anything that you start new, you're going to feel really, really bad at it initially
Yeah.
because everything else is, you know, oh, I can write really well. Why can't I draw? You know, things that are very close or logically seem very close. Um, they just need training and muscle memory.
And to run off the back of what Governor says here about every child can sing and dance, um, it reminds me of a quote by Sir Ken Robinson, the education theorist, who I have a lot of time for. I really enjoy his books. Who says all children are creative. What happens is we get educated out of our creativity.
Sadly so. I mean, not to bash education systems or anything along those lines.
Every educator I know agrees because education systems are not. This is really tangential, isn't it?
It's fine.
The people who study education theory tend not to be the people who make policy, and the people who make policy care very deeply, but
Mhm.
are going off gut instinct.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going through what'll get you a job. I have no idea what jobs will exist in 5 years.
I never thought I would be doing this. I mean, I was probably one of those children who put down, I want to be a fighter plane or an astronaut or something.
You have
But
to be a fighter plane.
yeah, I want to be. Yeah.
Someone please clip that. I want that as my ringtone.
I want to be a plane.
Just Mikey going, me. Hang on a moment.
Yeah.
Just going to mute my microphone because his cat is yelling at me.
Okay. Yeah, when I was little, I remember going through the sort of like, what do you want to be when you're older, and that there was even a system, and I think I came out as a librarian, and I was like, interesting.
I got civil servant
But
and accountant.
it bears no resemblance to the life I led after that point, and I think being boxed in or pigeonholed can be really harmful to anybody because it restricts what they're going to do.
Biggest pieces of privilege my school taught me, the one that I'm genuinely grateful for, is it made me think I am capable of learning anything. So it never occurred to me to think I can't learn this. I don't want to learn this is one thing. I don't have the time to learn this.
Yeah.
But like when I was in my 20s, I just decided to start learning Japanese because I didn't speak Japanese and I wanted to. I've now forgotten most of it, but by, within a year and a half, I had 5,000 words of fluency, which is about a 3-year-old child. Right? It's not great, but people would look at me like I'm a genius. It's like a kid can do this. Right? It's just finding the time. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with the LMMS, especially when the students get hold of it and start releasing their
own
kicking
beats.
tracks. Thank you.
Beats.
Would you excuse me for a moment? I have to give his cat some water because he's just sitting there going.
And ladies and gentlemen, that will now be my ringtone. Oh, bless him. So yes, the LMMS course, just to re-go over what we were talking about there, it is now being recorded. The first few lectures for the early access people should be live towards tomorrow afternoon in the UK, and then onwards and upwards from there. So the first section itself is going to be all about just getting the program set up, including how to install it. Now, it's really weird. Telling someone about installing something seems... It almost feels like, and I've heard this said plenty of times, oh, if you need help installing a bit of software, then this is no good. You should, this is far more advanced than installing software. But a lot of people are presented with software already on their computers. So if there is a genuine use case for installing your software, especially on the Mac. So you launch LMMS for the first time, and then it asks, oh, this is not an authorized program. Are you sure you want to launch it? But in order to launch it, you've actually got to go into your system preferences, security, and go to a specific place and maybe type a password in. And that's the sort of thing that will throw people. Fortunately, when you launch Windows, it doesn't. The Windows version, it doesn't say this is an unrecognized program. But a similar thing exists with that. And there's not an OK button. There's a bit of text that you have to click on to then progress forward. So it's not always obvious for people if they...
It's also, if you're coming off what we just said, where, anyone is capable of learning something. Like they may have to learn it in multiple ways, and I'm not going to get into learning styles because that is pretty poorly supported by evidence. But not everyone's going to come at it the same way. They're going to click a different way. If we then don't address the barrier for entry for the complete beginner of how do I get this on my machine, we've kind of undermined our own point.
Exactly. And this being the first course that we've ever done on LMMS, we've not got any other beginner courses to refer people to. So we've got the first section, or the first section of the Blender Creator Suite is completely free and open for everyone, which means that...
I was going to ask, are you going to do this with LMMS?
Maybe. It depends how
the installation,
fits.
not the...
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. So I think the installation and getting going, if we can at least give someone that helping hand to get them started, I mean, that's great. If they then want to go off on their own learning journey from there, that's even better. I mean, we're all for learning. That's the thing, isn't it? Trying to get someone from doing nothing to creating something, whether it's coding or art-wise, it's just so rewarding as a teacher. It's amazing.
Yep. Especially people who came into it believing that they couldn't achieve what they end up doing. Like that it's so wonderful to see. Governor was asking, is there a small peak in the stream? Unfortunately, peaking at a song is not often very interesting. 'Cause you can't see. I think we're probably too early in the course to play anything.
Yeah, I think we're too early in the course for a sneak peek at it. But what I'll try and do is actually arrange, maybe not for next week, but maybe the week after, a video that shows those things, so we can swap over to it and then discuss it afterwards if there's any questions, rather than a here's a live thing where, for instance, the audio's not set up at the moment. Jan's here, thank goodness he's here this week, as in audio wise, and we're not repeating ourselves like 2 weeks ago.
Well, yesterday we both had really bad headaches. My entire body had a migraine, and you were sitting in a dark room. So if that had happened today, this stream would have just been 2 empty rooms with us in the other one going, ow.
Yeah, low light stream. But yeah, on that front, a small sneak peek. I'll put together like almost like a teaser trailer, but not salesy or anything. Just a
you know what we could sneak peek.
What?
So Mikey hasn't seen it yet. He was going to see it, but I always bother him before we start streaming to pull the latest version of the repo. And as some of you know, I have constant weird problems with Git.
I've got them today.
And today the problem was I pushed it and Mikey couldn't see it. So we think he now has it. And I've been improving the very early exploratory procedural generation for the dungeons. And I'm putting it that way because this is not the way the algorithm is going to end up working. There's a bunch of stuff with the assets I would have to redo. There's some problems I need to solve. I want to change how walls and rooms are defined. But Mikey hasn't seen it yet. So I was thinking Mikey could share his screen with me, and he could share his screen with you, and then he could explore the PCG test level.
Which I've not seen yet. So I'm going to push.
He's not seen yet.
I'm going to push these 2 buttons together and pray that it works. So that and that. And then move this out of the way. Otherwise,
yeah, so you'll need the PCG test,
which I'm in at the moment.
No, you're not.
And then we need to go PCG test. Oh, I thought you meant these.
Yes. Yep.
I actually prepared this before the stream. Here we go. Oh, there's something funny happening over there.
Yep, that's the player.
Hi, Aria. How you doing?
Yep. I'm fine. How are you?
Oh, we're role playing. Playlink?
No, you can playlink. Now you can press F6.
Ba-doing. And here we go.
Now this will take longer to generate.
Because we're generating a level.
Yeah, and it's not optimized yet. I've made it a lot quicker. At one point it was 3 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, the other thing I'll do is just ask the stream at the moment, how are you finding the audio in the background? Is that at a good level, the music that is? Or is that too loud?
I think they're just hearing it.
So this is 100% procedural. Have we got enemies in yet?
No, I'm not touching navigation. I started doing it. I started working on A-Star, and I realized all of this is changing so much in 4. I'm actually not going to worry about enemies for a long time. I'm not going to put in the navigation yet. I'm going to just play with the procedural generation until I've got something that feels right. This is getting there, but not quite there.
So all of these rooms, am I right in saying, are procedurally generated?
There are some empty rooms, and there are some with pillars in, which are just rooms with pillars in. But these are...
Library!
They're in fact 2 different kinds of library.
Oh, nice. So
the bookshelves, if you go back and look.
Oh, yep. Oh, I can pick up books as well, can't I?
No, you can't. These are made so that they're not full of rigid bodies, because it was just a ridiculous amount of physics objects on the screen.
That would be a stupid amount of physics object. Imagine if you could topple a bookcase.
Well, that's the thing, right? When it was just one room and it was 4 books on it, it was fine. So I'm thinking of putting in a special thing, but it's picking which bookshelf or no bookshelf. It's also doing the same with the candles.
Nice.
Each bookshelf has a chance of spawning up to 2 candles, and it's choosing from a list of them.
Oh, that's nice. So that means that each time one of these gets generated, it'll have different candle?
Apparently Zach can't hear you.
Can't hear me? Or can't hear Jan?
I think it's you. It looks like you, and it might just be because the music is slightly loud.
Okay, well, let's go in and turn...
Oh, sorry. Can hear you clearly. My eyes were being
okay,
crazy.
there we go. Well, I've turned the extra sounds down anyway.
This is the standard material settings. I've just put screen reflection, what's it on? I've just added the doors today. In fact, just before the stream.
Nice.
Each doorway has a random chance of spawning a door. Here's another library style.
Oh, this is nice. And the tables are randomly placed in there by the looks of it.
I'm glad you think so. They are not random. They are according to very specific rules.
Also, do you pop some nodes down and then each node has a chance of spawning a table?
In some rooms, in this one, what I do is I do that with the bookcases. With the tables, I actually just put the tables in and say, okay, you have a chance of deleting them.
Ah, okay.
So I'm just playing with which one is easier to put.
No, that's awesome. So we've got both additive and subtractive.
Yes.
Generation.
Well, you say it's awesome. I think we should be sticking to one, but I'm still exploring, so I haven't stuck to one yet. I'm kind of trying different techniques. I do like two libraries next to each other.
Or three.
Yeah, you're right. It is three. And we don't know what's through this door yet.
It's
a library.
And another. This is an altar with some sarcophagi around it. Now, there's only one way to the exit at the moment, isn't there?
No.
Oh no! Nice.
I can show you the thing if you like. There's an export variable you can tweak.
Oh, nice.
But we have a chance of junctions. Yep.
Nice.
So what I'd like to do is put in, like, instead of an empty bookcase, maybe a pile of wood or a broken bookcase.
Oh, chest.
Yeah, non-functional, just a chest. I haven't put the inventory system in yet, or the chest system in yet. Or rather, it's just not wired up to this level.
I feel like I should be close to the exit now.
Oh!
Hey! Not planned, because it's procedural that the next level will be different.
It will be different. If you want, I can show you the settings.
Yeah. So
And what I haven't done yet is put them all in one place. But if you go to the root of this scene, you've got some export variables. You've got room chance and erase fraction.
Oh wow! So that was only there's up to 36 rooms. Is that right? There'll be
there are 36 rooms if we're including corridors.
Gotcha. Nice. I mean, that felt quite big. I could imagine if that had a couple of enemies in each room, that would have felt. I mean, I'll play with it now. I'm going to lower the room chance down to 1.
So you'll just have corridors.
Let's lift it up slightly, and it's going to feel completely different.
Yeah. You don't want to. Yeah, you press the right button. The mouse was in a different place.
Yeah. So this is going to feel completely different. So we've got a room. Oh, this takes me back to Doom or Castle Wolfenstein.
It takes me back to Maze Runner in the 1980s.
But isn't this a completely different feeling?
Yep. I mean, this is the part of the thing, right? I mean, I also could do things like each level would have a different torch color and different lighting. And then you put in with the enemies and so on, and you can really start playing with templates.
I mean, that really long corridor is awesome. And of course,
I do want to put in some corridor pieces with a chance to have traps in them. Like those gouts of flames and things. Oh, you found a storage room.
Hey. I'm speed running this one a little bit more. There we go. There's the exit. So as you can, that is awesome. Just being able to tweak a value like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just changes the feel of the game so much.
I mean, there's more you could do with that. Like if you open the scene room maker down in the file system.
Okay, it's different. Yes, room maker. Okay, nice.
It'll have an export variable.
Chance of rare floor.
So, of the rooms that are being generated,
yep,
is it going to be an empty room, or is it going to be something with things in it?
Ah, nice. And I presume you can put extra export variables in here for chance of
I mean,
enemy
what I
and
should do
things
is
like
put
that.
them all in one place. But well, chance of enemy we already have in a difficulty setting.
Many options then.
Yep. And one more thing I've been doing is if you open, I think it's called Book Spawner or Random Shelf or something like that.
Okay, let's try shelf. Random shelf.
Random. Yep. Open that. And what this is doing is opening one of these bookshelf V1, V2, V3s. So that's just a placeholder so I can see where it goes.
Yeah.
So if you open bookshelf V1, for example.
That's 1, 2, and 3.
So with just 3 shelves, we're able to get enough of a difference. What we really want is more room types than there are grids in the level.
Yeah.
We don't want it to feel like you're hitting the same room again and again and again. Right now we're going to, because there are only 4 or 5 unique room types.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's all procedural.
That's awesome.
And there's a shelf chance, so you can remove that or raise or lower that. So what's the chance that this shelf is going to exist?
Oh, nice. I love it when I don't see things for a while, because occasionally we end up updating one another, like lots and lots and lots. And sometimes it can be like we touch base once or twice in the week. And it's amazing just seeing the change and what's going on. Of course, if I tried to pull anywhere, it wasn't going to work, but there we go.
I mean, I'm hoping to get, well, I'm saying hoping. What I should do is in the next few days, put these into a scene people can run and play with the variables and just run through it, as well as the existing dungeon we've already got with its handcrafted content and all the rest of it.
Nice. I mean, that's awesome. I love it.
I did start playing with A-Star navigation.
Yeah.
And what I did was I created a grid of nodes, which would then get removed once they've been used. But each node would report its position to the main scene, and they would all be added to an A-Star node. And then I was like, wait, they're going to have to connect to each other.
And of course, you could spend an
I've got to
awful lot of
connect
time.
this room and the doorway and this room, and they've got to know where to connect.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a lot of work for something that's probably going to change quite drastically pretty soon. Whereas I could just be working on actual procedural generation.
Yes, there is a good chance if the Blender 3 beta comes out before I start recording, I will do the Blender stuff here in Blender 3.
Very nice.
I think there are going to be some awesome points in here with some of the new features in 3 that will actually be useful. I don't want to jump and go, yeah, new features, it's going to be so exciting, where, you know, most of the time you'll still be using the basic features that have existed in Blender for years and years. But yeah, big things are coming, and they look awesome.
Now, I'm going to have to radically redo most of that procedural generation, because currently, if you have 2 rooms next to each other, they just overlay the walls.
Yeah.
Which is a waste of geometry.
And it can look a bit funny if you get that Z fighting. On the rare occasion that 2 bricks line up, it just it goes all fuzzy.
Yeah, I mean, it gets flickery. That I haven't seen yet, although it is possible, and may well happen. It's more, why am I increasing the vertex count so high?
Yeah, and obviously if we're not careful when we're generating rooms, because we're adding all of this geometry in, it can cause a lot of slowdown if you're not careful. Because you've suddenly got a ton of geometry. Of course, occlusion's coming in 3.4.
Yep.
So that's going to help massively with that. And again, it should be part of the main.
Part of the reason we moved away from using a grid map, which has made things a lot more difficult from a procedural generation point of view, is we don't have to have everything visible or everything not. We can remove by room. I actually played with a way of sort of cheating that today, and it works, but you get rooms popping in and out of existence.
Oh, because it will use like the origin of the room, therefore looking down a corridor.
Today what I did was I put a visibility notifier in all 4 corners and an area in the middle. So if you're in range, if you're within 100 meters or 50 meters, whatever it was, this room is visible. If you are not, and all four are not visible, then hide the room. But for some reason, at a big distance, it wasn't able to tell that it could see all four of them. I think it was out of camera distance or something. So it was just a black hole in the corridor, and then you get closer and it pops into existence. And rooms popping
Yeah.
into existence feels very 1992.
I mean, I was going to say back in the day, whatever that day was, a while back, we had to really think carefully about how we utilize the resources on a computer. So having fog of war, or whatever you want to call it, was really, really useful. What was the Magic Carpet game? It might have been called
Magic Carpet by Bullfrog.
Boom. But I remember that was heavily cloaked in fog as you were going around, and numerous games of the same ilk. I remember I replayed it recently on an emulator from the Amiga days, but it was a 3D helicopter game, and we're going back to like the helicopter had. Ooh,
Actually got a ship.
no, it was before Apache. It was really, really basic, but they didn't have any fog, so I think they used dithering on
Yep.
the, but it wasn't very much. It just looked like eternal darkness, and you were flying around a void. So I think fog would have been better, but again, not very realistic. So
Zach, you are quite right. Procedural generation should not look random. The idea is to use rules to make a space feel real. Right now, this is still pretty random, right? 5 library rooms into a crypt. You could make a story about this, but
yeah,
you'd need some more props and things to make that make sense. What I want to do is get to the point where the rooms can be occasionally double-sized, where there can be there are specific rooms that must show up, specific rooms that require a certain number of doorways. So you can put things in the back, like a throne room. I don't really want to do the current method I've got because randomly rotating the floor and having the throne with the back to the only door in the room feels weird. Maybe a certain room needs
yeah,
another room next to it. So, a kitchen must have a storeroom, that kind of thing. I'd like to get to the point in the
yeah.
PCG where I've got that built in. Right now, this is still very exploratory.
Yeah, and that makes sense. If you could even put rules in place so that rooms have to progress in a certain order. So you can't have this layer of rooms essentially without another layer between them.
Well, especially when you start, as we spoke last week, start doing locks and keys.
Yes, that's going to
Like
be
if
a
the only
challenge.
key is behind the locked door,
Oops.
it's a bit, yeah, opening the box with the crowbar that's inside it.
That would be fantastic. I mean, a great analogy would be like if you were procedurally generating a landscape, you could feasibly say, well, we're going to have soil on top, then rock underneath, and then bedrock under that. You wouldn't put the bedrock on top. You'd need it to be in a set order to make some sort of logical sense, so the world feels like it exists, that it's tangible and not made
Well,
up.
I'd probably start with the base.
Boom, 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 boom. No.
It's worse than the argument he and I had about the word meme before the stream.
Oh, you like the memes, do you?
I thought he was messing with me. It was like, oh no, we're spelling this word differently. Okay. You have no idea what I'm talking about. Like, I've just come out from a migraine. Don't mess with me. He looks so unimpressed.
No, but um it's awesome, and as Zach just says here, he loves these streams. I think progress is awesome, and also and I'm sure Jan does as well, love showing you the guts of it, because it shows you also how when you're developing a game you have to explore different options, different opportunities. It's not just about and we don't want it to be this either. Look at as Jan was saying right at the very beginning, look at our recipe. Copy our recipe, and you'll end up with a game that looks exactly like ours. Great. We want to make sure that you become chefs as you go through here and actually cook up something rather than delicious.
Nice.
I'm getting hungry again now.
Me too. I've just eaten. There's also One of the downsides of making large educational content is you come across as this all-seeing oracle who knows everything and sees everything as an oracle. I realized that was really tautologous, but I'm doing it anyway. Um, and that can be really off-putting.
Mm.
Like there's something about the gulf between the student and the teacher, where if it gets a certain distance, you kind of feel like you shouldn't be asking questions, you shouldn't be deviating too much. Whereas if we can show you, we're experimenting with this, we're trying to find the right way of putting this in the code. If we were just making an indie game, there's all kinds of little shortcuts we would take, which we could optimize and would look good, but they're not best practices, and you don't want to put them in. And they'd probably cause trouble further down the line. There's so many you don't want to make.
Yeah.
But it's things like, this variable name isn't consistent.
Mm.
Like, that's not a huge problem, but you should probably not teach that.
Yeah, definitely. There are certain things that be like I think Zach has a good point here when he's saying how very early things tend to shroud in secrecy, and I mean there are some IP issues around that, and they want to hold their cards close to their chest if it's the next Naughty Dog game.
Or if the game just has to be taken out of production.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of games that also perhaps sell art books to go along with them are often very successful games, and all of that comes afterwards. So it's almost like an after sales technique to sell with a bigger game, rather than, oh, look at how we're doing, look at our production. But I do think there's a lot of secrecy around certain games because of perhaps the IP or the whole building up
Marketing and
anticipation. Yeah.
And it can be an absolute disaster for a commercial game
Mm-hmm.
to do early, very big hype and then not release quickly or
Yep.
have to cut features.
Two big
No
ones
Man's
in
Sky.
recent time. No Man's Sky, yep. Hypixel as well. I got super hyped when I saw the Hypixel trailer. It's like Minecraft.
Yeah.
But more detailed. And I
I
thought
got that from the high.
high in a low pixel, high pixel. Or it should really be high voxel, really. But anyway, I digress. The game looked amazing. I showed the kids it. They got all excited about it. I don't even think it's out yet. And that was like 3 years ago. So there can be this sort of ebb and flow that you almost have
Cyberpunk
to...
2077 was like that. I mean,
yeah.
they started announcing it, what, 7, 8 years in advance? Maybe more?
And
And when the game
pre-rendered
finally
scenes,
came
yeah.
out, and like a year before it came out, they really hyped up the machine. And then 6 months before, 3 months before, the hype was really massive. This is going to be the single greatest open world game. And then the thing came out.
Oops.
And boy, was that launch bad. And there were massive bugs, and all that's fine. I actually have issue with the game design, and I don't think the people who made that game actually understand the genre. Not open world, but cyberpunk. Like cyberpunk is trying to do something very specific. It's a reaction to a very specific political reality in the 1980s, which is sort of resurgent now. And just to ignore that and make it a cool game about guns is kind of to miss it.
Yeah, I can get that. I still haven't played it, and I probably will never download it. Oh, your batteries have run out. You know what? We can almost time 45 minutes by those batteries failing.
I know. They used to last longer as well.
So yeah, we had a couple of comments on one of the videos last week. So we've gotten hopefully back into the habit now of also chopping up these big live streams. You may have noticed that we put little clips out to make sure that some of the content's in a more easily digestible format. I totally understand that for us, doing an hour stream a week, updating everybody who's here, being able to have that update, but perhaps people don't have an hour, and perhaps what we're talking about now is the most important thing for people. And of course, it's later on in the stream, so they very well might miss it. So we're starting to chop things up now and do clips again. We did clips last year, but but we've worked out a way of being able to pump out some clips as well. And we had a couple of questions on there. And when we were chatting at the end of the stream, I was mentioning about Rimworld, and it was great, that sort of like the conversation that went on there about how different games, you just have a different feel about them, and how small changes in how you would be able to play them might completely radically change the game itself. I mean, one of the discussion points in there was, okay, we've got a attack at the moment. Would you mind stop having your fit about whatever it happens to be and deal with that, and then you can have your meltdown? It was, you've got no agency over the player suddenly
Yep.
having that. So I still, I like to give games, it might be a bit of a self-punishment, but I like to give games a little bit more of a chance these days, especially when they're highly, highly revered games. So I played again with Rimworld, and Psychic Drone or something. I'm like, great. So
The
every
thing about RimWorld, and this is one that I always struggle with, is you have to look forward to the disasters.
yeah,
Trying to win or have a good colony is actually to have a bad time.
because the odds are stacked against you because it's all set up.
It's trying to generate interesting stories.
Yeah.
It's not trying to be a game. It's trying to be a game. It's not trying to be a let's find the most efficient path.
Yeah.
It's trying to be what happened to these crazy settlers.
So taking that, and using another game I've sunk far too many hours in, Kerbal Space Program. And it's again, it's just a sandbox. You create your own story. You can follow along with missions to gain money and points and everything. And often I play just the science tree. So money isn't there, but you have to gain science to unlock parts to improve your spaceships. Anyway, so I send up a Kerbin up into orbit around the planet, and I start the deorbit burn, and I don't have enough fuel. So I've got a Kerbal stuck in orbit around the planet. Okay, no problem. Send up another rocket. And it's I made like a spaceship, so an SST, I think it is, surface to orbit. Flew up, collected him, went in, came back into the atmosphere. Boom! All the Kerbals died in a horrible atmospheric re-entry spin. Bang! And I was gutted. But it's a story, it has generated a story from it. I'm not reiterating it quite as much as I can. Hello. Really? Yeah. I forgot about those in the room. Never mind. But yeah, you see, I loved that. That was an unforeseen consequence. But again, going back to that, I felt like I was in control of it, and I was deliberately responsible for it because of the direct levers that I was pulling. There's no land this plane.
It's quite hard to have a goal you're trying to reach in a game that's all about systems. I picked up Wasteland 3 this week, which is by far the best CRPG style game I've played. Like, it's just very well written and very well done. And I found myself, I'd get into a combat I didn't want to get into and going and reloading. And like, what am I doing? And the point of this game is not to have a perfect run. The point of this game is to make hard choices. But I'm looking at this game with a victory condition, and I want that victory condition. So I'm kind of going against the design.
Yeah, I had that problem with XCOM because I knew that later on, the original, not the original one, but the original of the new ones, I think it was just called Enemy Unknown. Anyway, but
That was the expansion, but yeah.
okay. I knew that if I lost a team member late game, that was it. The game's over. So you're playing such a careful game. There was really no way of grinding
Now, XCOM
your
2,
way
they
back.
did do some things to try and encourage you to level up multiple teammates.
The
And some of the
tiredness
games
or fatigue, wasn't it?
There was a fatigue thing, and there was also a crew bond thing, where two crew members would become best friends, and they get bonuses if they're on missions together. But one of them will be tired, so you'll sort of try and get as many different groups as possible. And then, of course, if one of them dies on the mission, the other one's there, they're going to have some sort of mental break. I remember a game of XCOM 2 where I had these two elite units who were bonded very high level and all kinds of stuff, and one of them died, and my other one went berserk. and I'm just looking in horror as this guy vaults over a wall and kills every enemy in one turn. I'm like, all that. If I'd known that, I'd have killed your friend months ago.
Yeah.
The original XCOM had a really interesting design problem, though.
Are we going back to the original one?
Well, no, the original reboot.
Yeah.
XCOM 1, we'll call it that.
Why not?
And it was something that Sid Meier's pointed out to the lead of the XCOM franchise when they're explaining the plot to him, which is okay, so you start as the controller, and then slowly the aliens are taking more and more territory. And the question came back, so you're playing not to lose. What do you mean? It's like, so you start with your victory condition, and you're trying to stop the enemy taking it all away from you by the end, as opposed to starting with nothing and getting it all. Which is why in XCOM 2, you start with nothing and you get everything, because it's a more compelling journey.
Well, it's every time you win something, the human psychology, I think it's done with speeding points as well. I mean, this is I think it's in Italy. They start with like 10 points on their license.
Yeah.
The fear of losing is greater than the fear of winning, and obviously winning something back after a defeat is a classic story.
There's a great TED talk about this from a marketing executive. He says in the UK, you get 0 points, and then that you add to them, which means every time you call speeding, you're like, "Well, hey, another 3 points."
Oops. Yes, XCOM, I found it punishingly hard. The bit that really got me is my first encounter with the telekinesis, or the big orb classical alien grey head guy, big eyes. And I'm like, oh, you've taken control of my character. Okay, what's the defense for this? I don't have one. Oh.
There's lots, but you have to learn them.
Yeah. I died heavily on that mission.
Yeah, no, you will die the first few times, and then the time you realize a flashbang will disorientate the thing.
Nope.
XCOM 2 solves a lot of those problems, and it's very good at generating stories. But again, it still has that problem where if you lose high-level characters, losing high-level characters is fundamentally risking the game in a way that low-level characters doesn't.
Yeah.
Because high-level characters can just deal with so much nonsense. Like the abilities you get are so powerful in that game that when you lose that character and they're just gone forever, you can actually be hosed. I was trying to find a nice way of saying that.
Remember, we're kid friendly.
But it's interesting how those little decisions can have such a huge impact on the player experience.
Yeah.
And Cyberpunk really is my go-to example for this, because there's so many little decisions in this that sound reasonable. Then you play the game and it's like, this whole system doesn't work. Like the crafting system in Cyberpunk. There is no reason to use it because I am constantly being given new guns that are better than anything I can craft unless I spend hours grinding crafting. But at that point, I could just get better and better guns for not doing that.
Yeah.
So I'd have to make a deliberate effort to engage with this system.
So broken systems can happen in any game. And I don't know whether this would be called a broken system or not. And I'm late to the party on it anyway. But in Minecraft, you can trade with villagers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's I came across, one of the kids mentioned something, so I thought, oh, I'll give that a go, whatever. There's a Fletcher in the game, so you go and chop wood, you make it into sticks, you sell it to the Fletcher, you get a load of gold coins, you go to the other person over there who's selling a diamond pickaxe, and you're like, okay, I got a diamond pickaxe now. I'm like, that would have taken me 3 hours of gameplay normally. I don't know how lucky you are getting diamonds. I'm like, well, that's a bit of a hack. And so I went to the nth extreme. I bred all these villagers, and now I've just got a place where I can buy anything I need at any time. Well, that's kind of destroyed the craft. Yeah, it's broken the crafting system. Why do you need to craft anything? So, yeah.
There's a great example of this in the original Ultima Online, like the first 3D MMO. Is it even 3D? Might actually be a 2D MMO. Way back when. And one of the things they're really proud of, and they weren't telling people they were doing this, but they created a whole ecosystem where they had predators and prey and herbivores and carnivores, and things would like move in population and grow and decline and grow and decline. And the
Hmm.
players broke it on day one because it simply did not occur to the game designers that players would seek out every single animal and murder it for the tiny bit of XP they got. So they ended up having to cheat it anyway and just completely and spawn in animals constantly because players were just murdering everything.
Oh, humans.
Yeah.
I never crafted diamond tools or armor in Minecraft. I was farming until I could afford to buy all the armor. It's just, yep.
I mean, last time I played Minecraft, villagers were um, much less powerful. Like they were just the exchange rate was bad. But I did have a skin that I made that was me made of diamond.
I can color in myself blue. Yes, I agree with that. It is a more renewable way. I think it's a balancing question. Because once you've can just chop down a tree and convert it. I mean, the currency, trees are worth more than diamonds because of the emeralds you can get from just a tree.
And that feels like a comment on the diamond industry, to be honest. But
Just in Minecraft.
okay.
Yeah. There you go. That's my Minecraft villager impression. I think that was loud enough to not be noise cancelled as well.
No, I heard it. I heard it. It was
Good,
good.
good. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
So I'm a bit happy with the procedural generation so far. It's still very early. I'm not happy enough with it yet to say
Yeah.
this is great, but it's making it feel like an actual place.
No, and just the fact that we've exposed those sliders where you can just change the feel of the game. I was actually I was like, oh yeah, this will change the feel of the game. I'll just turn this slider. Oh, it really has changed how the game.
Well, the other thing is if you go
that
into
particular level.
the room PCG test and you do the fraction arrays and put that all the way up, you'll get a lot more loops. Basically, if that's 0, there is one way to every room. If it's 100, every single room has multiple connections. In fact, if it's 100, everything is exposed. It'll just be an
There's
open
the
grid.
exit over there.
Yeah.
Just run through the level. But that could be a viable room option. I mean,
If you want it, go for it. I mean, you have the thing. You can play it.
I know, right?
I actually have the variable locked at 75%, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, to stop me cheesing the game.
Well, it comes a point where it just doesn't feel like a dungeon at that point. It feels like a warehouse.
It's a lobby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're just coming up on the hour. We're a couple of minutes from it.
You're welcome, Roderick, but bear in mind that I put Enter Sandman in Mikey's head before the stream.
Any questions?
Zach says, ever played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Monster House? No, I have never played a Pokemon game.
The kids play that. I genuinely don't get it. It's
Pokemon originally came out when I was about 18, so I was just too old for it. And ever since then, I've felt like old man shouts at clouds. Like, what is this? I don't even. Why are they squirtling all over my Pikachu? What is happening here? You know what? I'm going to leave it alone.
Yes. I
remember Digimon.
So I kind of get it because obviously my kids are into it. I don't. It's really weird, but I go back to that game we played, Jan, where I said, "Oh, I don't like card. I like card games in real life, but I'm not sure I like this trading cards thing." I can't remember. Was it? I can't remember what it's called. But you trade your cards for different abilities, and your two wizards are combating.
Chaos Reborn.
Chaos Reborn, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was quite. You know, I'm open to trying new games, even if I think I don't like them, and JRPGs are one style of game that I just can't get. I just don't get it at all. And
I spent a lot of time in Final Fantasy VII back when it was released, and that was a lot of fun.
I think it might be the random encounters. I might have been put off in an early game or something. Perhaps I should give it another try.
I'm not a big fan of the tropes within the storytelling. I mean, I don't hate them. I'm just not moved by them.
Mm.
And the combat system in most JRPGs is fine.
It
But
feels like I'm rolling a lot of dice without any.
I'm fine with rolling dice. It feels like we're taking turns to hit each other with sticks.
Yeah, yeah,
I prefer a sort of more tactical combat where cover is important and stuff like that.
yeah.
I mean, the cutscenes in Final Fantasy VII, when you do those big monster card things, were great.
No,
But it was just a little FMV when, you cast Leviathan and this giant snake would always appear and do the thing.
Oh no, no.
Om nom nom.
Yeah. So if anybody has any recommendations for a JRPG for a person who doesn't like JRPGs to play, throw it in the comments. Because
I mean, if you want a good role-playing game, Wasteland 3 is very good. Like, I enjoyed Wasteland 2, and Wasteland back in the day was amazing. Wasteland 3, well, it's very violent, but it's
it looks it. I looked it up whilst
feels
when you
like
it.
a much. I'm actually not going to do the Fallout comparison. I mean, they share a lot of DNA anyway.
Yeah.
But the world in it feels a lot more realistic and gritty. And this time when I accidentally made a choice where I sided with the mobsters over the corrupt cops, and the police chief is yelling at me, and I actually found myself thinking like my character would, like, you're both bad choices, and these were not my orders. Like, I am maintaining a power balance here for my boss. You can go to hell.
Yeah. That sounds awesome.
I know what you mean, Stan. I've been watching a YouTuber who plays a lot of games like Gas Station Simulator. I agree. There's something about the idea of a game that's worse than the actual job. On the other hand, when I got Mikey to play Viscera Cleanup Duty with me, which is a space janitor game, like you're doing housework for 3 hours, we had a lot of fun.
What's this in this vent?
Well, Mikey's literally brilliant. I've got 24 buckets. I don't want to make 24 trips. I'll just put them all in the elevator, and I won't tell Jan. And then when I call the elevator, 24 buckets of blood land on me.
I didn't know the physics can handle an elevator full of blood. Guts.
But there is something deeply satisfying about efficiently going through a routine.
Yes, definitely.
In a way that the driest Euro board games also handle, in the sense of, I've got this engine, I've got it ticking over really nicely, and I'm just going to do paperwork with it now.
That's almost the premises of something like Factorio, though. It's both a building and an efficiency game, and people have, they take it to the nth degree, and they calculate the exact ratio and length of track and everything else to make the most optimized system. I don't do that. I really don't do that.
But I see a lot of little games like this, and they seem to all be using the same Unreal plugins, where you run a supermarket.
Yeah.
Go and buy the supplies and put them on the shelf manually, like stock your own shelves.
Like the opposite of supermarket sweep.
Yeah. I mean, you're literally just taking inventory and stocking shelves and hiring someone to swipe them for you. Like through the beepy thing.
So years ago when I was at university, I had a night job at Tesco, a supermarket in the UK. And there was something about stacking the shelves because it was one of those jobs where you could see your output immediately. You got immediate feedback that everything is sorted. You'd look up and down the aisle by the time you'd restock the entire aisle, and it would all look nice. And then you'd go home and do it the next day.
I got a temp job in a supermarket when I lived in Brighton in England, where they had just moved all the shelves, and my job was to stand there and help customers find items on a supermarket shelf in a supermarket I've never been to before.
Come with me for the mystery ride.
I'm just standing there for hours a day getting really sore feet while angry people are like, you've moved the chocolates. I'm like, I know, it's stupid, isn't it? I have no idea where they are. Should we go look for them? Oh, you're not supposed to say that. I'm a temp. I don't know where they are.
I remember a few things in that job that were really, really interesting. There was that towards Christmas they were stacking the front aisle with, so on the end of the two aisles they had like more shelving, and they had stacked it full of whiskies and other spirits. And I cheekily said, "Are you sure the shelves can hold all of this stuff?" Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course I can. Later that day, the whole thing had collapsed. Probably £1,000 worth of liquor all over the shop floor.
Weirdly, I'm reminded of a story my father used to tell of one of his early work jobs in the English National Opera. My father is a lighting designer, and he started as a lighting technician. So one day in a certain opera, they decided they wanted it was a ballroom with a big fireplace in the back, and they wanted little puffs of smoke coming from the fire. Well, you can't have a real fire live on stage, like you just can't. So what they did instead is they built a fake fire, and they put my father behind the chimney with a little smoke machine. And every now and again, he got a cue, and he'd just go. Pff, pff. Fine. So one day he's sitting there and he's 17 and he's really bored. So he decides to stretch his feet out. And he stretches his feet out and he kicks one of the flats, one of these big wooden things with the scenery on it. And the flat takes the flat next to it, which takes the flat next to it, which manages to pull the lighting bar, which does that one. And this whole thing dominoes down, leaving this little 17-year-old boy with a smoke machine. And the audience looking at him and he just goes, walks off stage.
This is my job. Oh,
No one was hurt.
there's always that. Oh, Snow Runner is fun.
I've heard good things about SnowRunner. Here's the thing, though. I suspect, and I don't have any research on this, but I suspect these tackle the same kind of parts of the brain as heavy flight sim and heavy train simulator games, where you've got this thing that you are entirely responsible for, and it's just going to react to you. And if you get it just right, then what you end up with, like in the old versions of Microsoft Flight Simulator, I'm saying the old ones because I haven't played the recent ones.
Yeah.
You sit there with a joystick and some maps and a protractor and the acetate, and you'd sit there in next to your computer and work out your flight plan, and then fly across America for hours while nothing happened. But you nailed this really complex thing and landed a Cessna. Like, there's something about mastering something that fiddly.
I haven't played Kerbal Space Program in a while, but towards the end of when I'd start the game, I'd do all the basic stuff, then I would set up geostationary satellites, because one of the things I had at the time was a mod that made sure that you couldn't communicate with your space center unless you set up a proper network of satellites, which now they've put in the base game anyway. So I'd do all that, and then I'd calculate the exact fuel necessary to get to somewhere, and then add 10%, because I'm not death burning or whatever, suicide burning towards the ground on this mission. And it was, as you're saying, really, really rewarding, because you'd put in a ton of effort and got a result from it. Yep. And even if it had failed, I'd have still been happy, because there were a lot of successes along that.
Silent Hunter was an amazing game. I remember that.
What did I play recently? We discussed it. F-17 Stealth Fighter, F-19 Stealth Fighter.
Maybe.
Back on the Amiga.
Yep.
I downloaded it from Good Old Games, and I was like, you know what?
I mean, I remember that on the ST.
I want to play this again. This is one of my favorite games. And it wasn't about flying a stealth plane at all. When I was playing it again, I was like, this is... Yeah, I tried crashing into the sea. You couldn't crash into the sea in the game. Yep. It would allow you to go up and down and open bay doors and shut them again. It was really just a hide and seek game. That's all it was. It was brilliant.
Which is fine. I mean, as people seem to be enjoying these stories, I will share one more story. I will share my first job as a technician in theatre. My first light. I was 14. And I was working as a lighting technician for the Young Vic Youth Theatre in London. and we're on week 3 of a 6-week run of a devised musical. A devised musical is a musical written by the company, and this company was a youth theatre, so children had written a musical.
That
And we had
sounds
6
awesome.
weeks of performance. It was not awesome. It's
Sounds
very
awesome.
boring. Well, when you're 14 and you already know everything, you don't really care what other people
Yeah.
think. So, right. So,
True.
I'm sitting there during performance 3 weeks in, and I'm in the lighting booth. And the lighting booth is about 3 meters wide, so 3 yards wide, maybe a little less. And it's made of very thin plywood, and there's no glass between me and the audience. And the audience member is about the distance from me to the camera. So I have to whisper. And I've got a lighting board next to me. And my job is to listen to the deputy stage manager, the DSM, where she says, "Stand by, please, LXQ15. Standing by. LXQ15. Go." Right. So as you might imagine, I'm a little bored. And this lighting board is so old that if I rest my elbow on it, the power will go down. Like it's from the 70s. So we're 3 weeks in. "Charlotte." "What?" Because she's been locked in a box with me for 3 weeks and I'm 14 and nowhere near as nice a person as I am now. "What does this button do?" "I don't know." "Don't touch it." Meanwhile, on stage, a woman is singing a very sad lament about the fact that she and her husband finally got to England, which was his dream. He immigrated to England, and on his first day, he was shot by an old rival in a nightclub, and suddenly this huge pink disco ball comes on. And I can't switch it off because I don't know what this button does, but pressing it again does nothing. And everyone on stage starts singing like this and looking to me. The lighting designer, a guy called Jono, who was my age and a friend of mine, was actually having his theatre GCSE like first test that day, and it was the lighting design for this show. And he was in the audience, and he ran backstage and tried to fix it. He couldn't fix it either. He was very angry with me. That was my first ever theatre gig, and I kept working in theatre for another 20 years.
You see, you saw all the fun you could have.
Oof. I have a great many opera and theatre disasters that I could share.
But until next time.
Yep.
Okay, guys. Thanks for the story, Ed. That's awesome. Has anybody got any final questions? Interpretive dances?
Jingles.
Jingles?
Would you like to show the proc gen one more time, or are we done?
We can do while everybody is thinking about their questions, if they've got any.
Why does my nose itch? I mean, I know why my nose itches.
Deep. Right, I need to move some stuff, otherwise this ain't gonna work. Let's launch the program and push some buttons.
Oop.
So this one and that one. Okay, nice. Okay. So the proc gen itself. Does anybody have any suggestions for the settings?
Ooh, I see what you did there. PCG.
So what should we play with? I mean, I because of the length of time and generation now, I'm not going to set this height and width anymore.
You can do. You can make it longer and narrower. No, that's stupid.
Well,
I was thinking like 8 and 4.
Oh dear. I didn't mean to actually lower it down. I didn't realize it would move so quickly. There we go. So let's do 8 and 4. Room chance. So chance.
You also press the little circle to put a default on it.
So room chance of 0.7. So what did the arrays fraction do?
A random number of walls are going to be removed.
All the walls. Ah, those are the ones. Ah, so this is your... This would be one path through.
So that is it a corridor or is it a room?
Gotcha. Oh, I'm moving the wrong one.
Godot's new lighting system will be compatible out of the box with PBR, I mean, the current one is too. Will the game have focus on making materials in Blender and exporting Godot's new PBR native lighting? Yes, but you can already use PBR in Godot. Godot
Yeah.
3 uses PBR.
So both of these two. So exporting materials from Blender to any program isn't really exporting materials because they're different render engines, and we're just very lucky that Cycles and Eevee, which are also different render engines, well, they're somewhat compatible between one another. When it comes to exporting, can I climb these? I can. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, so you can already export into Godot, as Jan was saying. And when it comes to the materials, what we'll be doing in the courses is you probably notice a lot of the stuff here is flat shaded.
Everything is flat shaded.
So when it comes to exporting materials, we'll be setting up a series of materials in Blender that match the materials in Godot, so there's no ambiguity. We will have a look at getting what exporting textures, which might be what you mean, from Blender over into Godot. But during the course itself, as you can see, we're going for a flat shaded look, which gives us a lot of options when it comes to basically colouring in our level.
Certainly found a lot of corridors here.
I have found a lot of corridors.
You seem to be lost in a dark maze. You need to know what baking to get the nice effective in Blender. Well, no. Okay. So I think there's two different things going on here. One is how do you get good lighting in Godot? Because you can also bake textures in Godot. Like that, there is a texture baking, a light baking mechanism you can use. If you want things to look exactly the same in Blender as you do in Godot, it's never going to look exactly the same because they're not using the same render engine. Like they're approximating light differently.
Yeah.
It is just not true though that Godot 4 is adding PBR. PBR has been in Godot for years. It just means physics-based rendering. So it's calculating the colors and the reflection based on where the light is.
So as a quick example here, if we go into this mesh and go to its surface properties, which are the materials, you'll notice here it's got
This is PBR.
albedo, metallic, roughness. This in itself is PBR. PBR.
It's also got normal map, which we are not currently using, which you could do. It's got depth, see above. It's got UV 1 and 2, so if we change UV maps, like this is PBR.
And one of the things I suppose that a lot of people misconstrued with PBR is the render.
Hang on a minute.
Yep.
Zach is saying if I apply a roughness texture to my object in Blender, it would not come through with that texture unless I bake it and reapply it in Engine. Okay, if you export the roughness texture, it will come through depending on the export file you have created. So not all exports will come through like that. OBJs won't. GLTFs will.
Providing you've set them up in a very specific way. And you don't have to bake your roughness map unless it's procedural. If you're using an already generated roughness map and you've UV mapped it to your object, all you have to do is make sure that you have in here the texture, you actually have your image texture, and you put it in there.
You just drag it in. You would create it like that.
Yeah, or you drag it in. Yeah.
Now these ones don't have UV mapping on them, so because they're designed to be flat shaded, so it won't work. But I could show you. We could create, for instance, a simplex noise and use that as a roughness. That would work fine.
There are lots of options when it comes to getting materials across, and the one important thing is Godot has PBR, Unity has PBR, Unreal has PBR, and
right. So the question specifically is how do I get Blender to automatically export a roughness map, a normal map, a metallic map, and all the rest of it? So that's to do with Blender. That's not to do with Godot.
Yeah, and that would depend on how it's created. So you would have to have, for it to export, you'd actually have to have the image texture itself. So in this case, if you procedurally generated your texture, you would have to bake it, as you say, so that it can be exported as an image. Otherwise, it wouldn't come across. But providing you've then got everything set up correctly so that GLTF, the exporter, can actually export it correctly, all of those will come across already pre-populated.
Yeah, and I think there's a... Okay, let me...
Whilst you're looking that up, there's a word of warning there. If you go and change any of those things and re-export it, those materials already exist in Godot.
Just going to share my screen, Mikey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on.
It is not that Godot 4 is allowing you to just drop in Blender files. This is a Blender file. This is a GLTF, a GLB. And I have opened it, and you can just drop it in. The thing that is changing is that you can now save this as GLB in Godot. If I try and save this now, it'll say you can't. I can't save this file format. But this is a Blender object. This is GLT, GLTF, GLB. It is not new to Godot 4. And if you want these materials to come, well, here are the materials, right? At the moment, I've just set up albedos and nothing else. If you want things like roughness and normal maps and all the rest of it, you have to do that on Blender's side. You can't just, like, they have to be exported in a way that can be read.
Yeah.
If Blender isn't exporting a normal map, it won't show.
You could, of course, providing something's UV unwrapped, you can literally just add it as an image texture in that material field.
Right. So yes, the import from Blender objects is changing. It won't automatically, as far as I know, read an image and figure out what the normal map should be. If the Blender file doesn't have that information exported, it won't generate it.
Yeah. So you'll have to have your normal map plugged into the normal principled BSDF shader node.
Trying to find this image that he's posted.
If you have
I don't know where it's posted.
If you have any other setup, so if you've got a series of extra nodes in your shader setup, you may find it doesn't come across. It literally has to go image.
Okay. SDFGI also supports specular reflections, both sharp and rough. This is to do with specular reflections of both kinds will just work. PBR just work anyway. It's not that PBR currently doesn't work. It's you can just drop them in and use these new features.
Interesting. Now, one thing about the specular is that is not in the PBR workflow. Specular and roughness are almost interchangeable. So a specular workflow is different from a PBR workflow as well. Now, for artistic reasons, I'm talking about PBR here, as in literally it's physically based. So for artistic reasons, sure, you can go and drag and change the specularity or the color of the specularity or the sharpness, so it lights either look more diffuse or tighter. That's more of an artistic choice, but that's not physically based rendering because you're now changing physics for an artistic choice.
Yep. However, to answer the original point, is this something we'll cover in the course? Yes, we could probably do a thing of if you're doing textures, here's how you would export your normal map and your roughness map and all the rest of it. As we're not using textures, we're just using blank materials, it's not really come up, but it's something we should probably look at.
And the main reason for just using the materials, even though you have a draw call disadvantage, we have a can swap materials out on the fly advantage. Which is super, super useful.
Yep, that's how I'm doing the books. All of the books on the bookshelf are one mesh, and I'm just adding material override.
Exactly. Now, there is another way of having all of these flat colors, where you have a grid of colors. They can be a pixel by a pixel wide. It's fine. And you UV unwrap a face to one of those colors. The problem is to switch colors, you've either got to change the palette it's looking up, essentially a lookup table, or you've got to re-UV unwrap your object, which is a crazy thing to do, to just change the color of something.
Yep. But I think that covers it.
Yes, it does. I think so. So Zach, just here as a final thing, he said workflow is just confusing topic for an amateur developer. One of the things about workflow in general is there isn't a workflow. It will depend on what you're trying to achieve and how you want to approach your work. So we've opted during this course to have a non-texture based workflow, so we're focusing purely on materials. And so if you're focusing on textures, then you'll have a slightly different workflow. If you were focused on procedural textures or different mapping techniques, you would have, again, a slightly different workflow as well. And really, and what we've done is right at the very beginning of developing your project, whether it's a piece of art, a piece of music, or a game, you have a design document, you have a framework in which you're going to build the game to. Even if it's not an exact specification, having it as detailed as possible when you first start will mean that you'll be able to progress forward, knowing what you need to achieve and working out which workflow would work best for whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, it's what's our plan to tackle this big complex thing?
Yeah, there's definitely no one way to do things. There's always going to be multiple ways, and sometimes working out that at the beginning may seem like you're wasting development time on it, but it pays dividends in the end, just knowing what you will be working to. You change the spec. Like at the moment, if we decided, you know what, we are going to do textures, we would have to throw out months of work and start.
None of the models would work.
Yeah,
none of them.
None of the models would work. We'd have to approach it in a completely different way.
Have to UV wrap every item, character, object, and piece of scenery in the game.
And that would obviously set us back time-wise.
That would be a Mikey problem, because I'm not doing that.
Auto UV unwrap.
Everything.
It's okay, I'll hide this problem behind a piece of geometry. Like, Mike, why off all the models? Why do they look like patchwork quilts? No reason at all. It's just an
design choice.
Yeah, just my aesthetic decision. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic time. Thank you for the jelly and the ice cream and the bread.
Did I miss ice cream?
I really want ice cream now. All right. We will see you next week. I'll see if I can get the something that you guys can run on the demo, so you can run around procedure generated plays with no NPCs and see what you can find in the next few days.
Awesome.
And bye.
Bye, everybody.
Reset.
No.
Reset.
No.
Reset.
Okay. Oh, there's another one.